Hello, it's Low Power once again. I'm here. This is today to talk about the different basketball eras, different eras of basketball. The reason why I want to talk about this because I'm doing a list of the greatest basketball players I've seen with my own two eyes. I've done 1 through 15. I think I'm gonna do a revision from 11 through 15. I really missed some players and got something mixed up, so I'm gonna revise that. But um, I'm doing I've done 1 through 15, the greatest players that I've ever seen with my own two eyes. I'm going to do a list on the greatest players of all time, in my opinion, by looking at their different, their stats and what their accomplishments over time. When I look at greatness, I'm looking at a person's total body of work. And I think it's important, though, for us to get some things straight on the different basketball eras. When we talk about better players, I might discuss. I don't know if I'm just gonna do a career comparisons, or I'm gonna do which players I really think were better. Now, if I do which players I really think were better, the realities of the different eras they played in will have to come into play. Now, we understand that a person can't help what era they played in, but we have to be realistic too when we look at certain areas. Like we look at Wilt Chamberlain, he dominated. Amazing player. I think 1 year averaged 54 points a game, something like that. The reality is he couldn't do that in this era. He couldn't do that right now. That's just being real. If we were being real, the player I look at that closely resembles him, Shaquille O'Neal. Shaquille couldn't average 54 points a game in this era, and I don't think Wilt Chamberlain could. And the fact that we can actually look at these players back when they played now is you can look on YouTube, look at their game. These guys are still great players, but there's no reason for me to believe that if Shaq could only average about 30 points a game at his best, that Wilt Chamberlain would average 50 points a game. So is that to say Shaq is better than Wilt Chamberlain, or Wilt Chamberlain couldn't do what Shaq did? I'm not saying that. I believe he could do what Shaq did, but he still wouldn't be the player that he was in that period of time. I look at great players like Oscar Robertson, was a great player, but when I look at him on YouTube, I just don't see him averaging a triple double in the league now. The reality in that era, they shot the ball a whole lot more. The game was up and down real fast. Defense wasn't a priority. There was I think about 30 more shots a game, 20 to 30 more shots a game for each team. So you're gonna get more rebounds. The players were a lot smaller. He was 6'5". He was a 6'5" guard. So he was the first big guard, big dominant guard. I believe in the game today. I believe he would still be a great player, but I don't think he would ever average 30 points a game. He averaged 30 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists. I don't see him doing that in today's game because the players are bigger, they're faster, and whether or not they play better defense, I believe they play better defense nowadays. But the reality is, there's less space on the court. You got less room to work with, so it's harder to score. And what I seen with the big guy, he doesn't seem that fast to me. He doesn't seem overly athletic to me. He seemed to be a very strong player with very great fundamentals. So I believe he was still, I don't know his career averages, but I could still see him getting 20, 22, 23 points a game, and maybe 6 or 7 rebounds, but maybe 6 rebounds a game. I think he would basically be the type of player he would probably be more like is a Paul Pierce that would get a lot of assists. I think he would get more assists in today's game because what they call assists today, man, it really depends on who doing your stats. If he like you or something. Because John Stockton got so many phony assists, man, it's just ridiculous. So I think he would still be a great player, still a top 10 player all time. But when people try to compare him to Michael Jordan, I just looking at him. My own two eyes to me are my best witness. he's not as good as Michael Jordan. So the greatest eras, to me, the best era of basketball ever was the Boston, the '80s, the late '80s, the mid to late '80s, and those were the best. Right at the turn of the '90s was the best era of basketball. That's when the best basketball was played from on the offensive side, the defensive side together with precision. Players knowing their role, playing with intensity, and on both sides of the ball. I believe that was the best overall era. You had the best basketball being played. The Lakers and the Celtics and the Pistons and the Bulls getting started. Houston Rockets were great back then. Those teams were great teams, and the level of play was so great on a night in, night out basis, and especially in the playoffs and in the finals. And those players from that era get a lot of props. When they did the top 50, a lot of older players were kind of upset, saying, they got a lot of respect, the players of that era, but that was the best basketball era. I'm sorry. In the '70s, the problems with the '70s was you had two leagues. You had the ABA and the NBA, so you had the best players spread out further. So that era of basketball wasn't that great. It just wasn't. It doesn't compare to the '80s and in the first couple of years in the '90s. Those were the best. Right now, actually, I believe right now though, we're getting back to the same level of play in the '80s. We're actually getting back there. So right now we have a lot of great teams and a lot of great players in the league at one time. With the expansion league, with the expansion of European players coming over, it's making the league a lot better, and the league is just about the same. And it may end up being better than even the '80s, if we be honest. But that's the best era. The best defensive era to me was the '90s. The defense during the 1990s was the best. When people talk about great basketball players, and some people want to say, they talk about Kobe Bryant, and they talk about how Kobe don't compare to Magic and Bird and them because the defense was better back then. That's not true. The defense in the '80s wasn't that great. It was good, but it wasn't that great, especially in the early '80s, mid '80s. When the Detroit Pistons came and played the type of defense the Detroit Pistons played, the bad boys that they played, became the standard for the league, and that turned us in. That took the league from that golden era to the defensive era. The defensive era was the '90s, from the 1990s all the way to 2000. The defense was so good in the league, no one could score. Not just some would say, well, the offense. I would agree that you have some points. The offense did fall off because the fundamentals was falling off. That does make a big difference in how offenses are ran, but the defense was off the charts because that's how teams start building their teams to win, by playing good defense. That was that was the best defensive era. So, but in the '80s it was okay. Kobe Bryant, Carmelo Anthony, all these players, LeBron James, would have no problem scoring in the '80s. People who try to say Shaquille dominated in the weakest center era is just crazy. He dominated during the '90s. During the greatest center era, he had the best stats out of all the centers, and he would dominate in the '80s too. It wouldn't be a problem. So when I do this list, talking about the best players, I think I'm gonna take into consideration their eras. And for that, people from the '80s, late '80s, and those who dominated during the '90s and stuff will get some big ups, some props, because those were the toughest eras to play ball in, or the best eras of ball. All right, peace.